So I noticed you moved to Seattle during the pandemic and when COVID started. Like, how did that feel? And how did you actually like acclimatize to where you moved to? And like, did you make any friends?
That's a great question. So I moved to Seattle 2019 of November. So after about 3 to 4 months of moving here, COVID started, right? So I would say, compared to other people who are new to the city, I was pretty fortunate. I came here with a set amount of with a good group of friends that I had connected before I moved to Seattle. So it wasn't necessarily really hard to reconnect with the people that I met in Seattle before I moved here. So I did have a really, really good group of people that are great supporters. A lot of them all work at Microsoft. So in the middle of pandemic, we started this chat on Facebook where we invited about 20 people from all over Seattle that work at Microsoft and Amazon. And this group chat is called COVID Beef. We'll pretty much talk about everything that's going on during COVID, whether it's, the current news and whatever is happening with the tech companies. We all share that in the chat. The chat is created for oversharing. So I think that without that group chat, I definitely wouldn't be able to survive COVID by myself. But I feel like just knowing that there are a few group of people right there that are supportive with just being very empathetic, understanding that it's not easy to be in the middle of pandemic by yourself. It was a lot more easier for me to kind of survive COVID and just living in Seattle on my own.
So you kind of mentioned that you moved to Seattle by yourself and you moved into a large 1-bedroom in Seattle by yourself. What was the biggest struggle that you kind of faced with that move to Seattle?
I don't know if you all know, but starting from high school, I lived by myself in Boston. So I thought, I will have the ability to pretty much move to any other city I want just because I'm very adaptable to pretty much all kinds of environments. But I would say moving to Seattle was definitely very different. I think the first thing had to do with the weather. A few of my friends were making fun of me because they were saying you were saying how you want to unfreeze Seattle. So in Seattle, there's this phrase where people say, Seattle freeze, which means that people pretty much don't go out once the raining season starts. And it starts from October to pretty much the end of April. So that's 6 months. Nobody really goes out to socialize and people like to stay in, right? So when I came to Seattle in November, I was very confident that I was going to, make a lot of friends and be able to go out and socialize. But when I came here the second month, I noticed that people actually don't really don't go out. And I started becoming one of them. I started not going out, staying in my own apartment by myself. At first, it was refreshing, but I think after a couple months, it just kind of got old because I noticed that not having a roommate makes a huge difference. I came home, I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I never wanted to go back to New York just because it wasn't really safe to travel then. So just being alone in the apartment was definitely very, very damaging to my mental health because I didn't have, a person there that I can talk to physically, right?
Okay.
Even calling my parents, all they were complaining about was, don't go out, stay in, don't, interact with people. Even when I want to go out to take a walk, I was scared because I didn't know what was going on. And, it was still a very new neighborhood for me, the place that I stayed.
And this was at the beginning of COVID, right? When this happened and the Seattle season hit. And that season is like the rainy season. Is that what you're saying? So it's almost like seasonal.
In the beginning of COVID.
Yeah. So it's like seasonal depression almost. And so you had to kind of figure out how to fill your time in by not seeing people. But you still had friends though that whole time, right? So I'm assuming it's kind of like when people have winter in New York or when they have winter in other states. Is that very similar, or am I not getting that right?
I would say what makes it very different is that majority of the people who are in Seattle, especially my friend group, they are not Seattle natives. So they all moved here from different cities, right? So I think that because I moved here during their second year in Seattle, they have already done pretty much everything in Seattle. So for them, it wasn't necessarily essential for them to go out, right? But for me, because I was pretty new to the city, I wanted to go out. I wanted to socialize with different groups of people, but it was very hard just because COVID happened and I wanted to stay safe. I feel like there's a huge difference being a, single male in a big city by yourself versus being a single female, right? Mm-hmm. So my safety was always my priority. Whenever I go out to grocery store, I would not go out after a certain time, just because when I first moved here, I didn't have a car and I didn't want to, walk around the neighborhood by myself, just because I had trust issues with, getting used to my neighborhood or getting familiar with how safe or unsafe it was.
Do you have a car now?
I do have a car now. Yeah, I got a car after June. So during the summer, I got a car.
So can you tell us what?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go.
So you talked about how you're, pretty good at adapting, because you moved from Boston, you moved from New York, and now you're in Seattle. Can you tell us a little bit of how you grew up and how it molded into the person that you are today?
So I don't want to go back to like when I was 3 years old, right? So I think that when I moved to Boston, it was the beginning of my independence journey, I would say, just because my parents didn't really come along with me to Boston. So I had to live with relatives when I was in Boston, pretty much figure out everything by myself. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that experience because it was the first time that I felt like I own my own life. And my parents are not the typical Asian parents that are really strict. So I was given a lot of freedom to explore what I like, what I dislike in terms of my hobbies, my, after school activities that I want to participate in. So after that, when I moved to college, I did join a lot of student organizations in college. So I was always very busy. And growing up in Boston, I have always thought myself as a leader. So when I, came to college, I started finding groups that I can gain my leaderships, right? So I actually joined student government and different organizations just because I really enjoy the feeling of being able to plan something, being able to own something that's bigger than myself.
What kind of student organizations were you part of?
So I was part of this tech organization. It's called AMC. And I was also the president of Multicultural Greek Council. And I was also the VP of membership for student government in my school. There are different organizations that I was kind of active in, but I wasn't necessarily active compared to these three orgs that I was in. So
what was like the hardest, like the best skill you learned from those organizations that you could like apply to like your future life, right? Because you said leadership, right? That besides leadership, what did those orgs like teach you about like being a leader itself, right? Like if you were to define the leader that you are now, like what is that?
I think what I've learned from my involvement with those organizations is that you have to be assertive with what you want to do. I think that's really important. A lot of people our age tend to lack of the ability to be very assertive or opinionated with what they want to do. But I was pretty assertive in terms of, planning events, reaching out to people. So definitely being assertive, it's one of the key leadership skills that you have to pick up, at least in my opinion. And the second thing is definitely be able to network with people from different levels. I think being able to participate in different orgs give you the ability to partner with them to do different events. So being able to network is definitely very important. I think the third one is just be empathetic, right? I think that knowing that, the school that I went to was very, very, I would say the communities that I was involved in college, they were very diverse, and just knowing that, be able to be understanding and knowing that each person has a very different, definition of what diversity really means. That one piece is really important. I think I was taught at a very early age in my college career that, diversity is really important, but not everyone has the exact same understanding of what diversity really means. Just being involved with those organizations and be able to really hear people out provides a lot of really great perspectives. And I think I really enjoy my experience in college because of that.
I know you said earlier that like one of the traits that people should have is to be more assertive. So like for me personally, I think I'm assertive maybe 50-50 of the times, because sometimes I'm kind of, shy or kind of afraid of what people may think of my decisions and everything. Have you kind of faced those kind of same kind of struggles or some kind of where people like say something or judge you and then you're just kind of turned off, or do you just kind of like ignore them and just kind of keep focusing on what you're doing?
Well, you just mentioned that you are assertive 50-50 of the time. Could you
Yeah.
provide me with an example of like why? Are you assertive 50-50 of the time with your friends or with people you don't know? Because that makes a huge difference, right?
I would say with my friends, I'm a little bit more assertive because I'm a little bit more comfortable with them. But with like people I don't know, because I guess they don't know how I work, I'm kind of like, all right, maybe I shouldn't come off as too bossy. Like sometimes with a new colleague of mine, right? I would, there's like certain things where like we have to do like, okay, we have to like, say example for real estate, we have to put up a listing. Sometimes I'm like, hey, like, can you do it?
Yeah.
Or like, okay, again, maybe I'll do it, you know, just because I didn't want to come off as bossy. That would be kind of like an example of me kind of not being too assertive.
Yeah, I think that I can kind of talk about my jobs. So the first job that I had, I was the only Asian female on my team, right? A lot of times when it comes to presenting yourself, there's a fine line between, you know, being very nice versus being assertive, right? So let's say that if I were to go to a client meeting and I am the only Asian female presenting on the table or just at the meeting, I don't want to come off as, you know, oh, I'm young, so I'm not going to speak up, or yeah, I'm the only, you know, younger one who's female here, so I don't feel comfortable speaking up, right? I would offer my opinion to see when they say, but sometimes, you know, it really depends on the culture of the company, right? If the company really supports women empowerment, people know that, you know, it really doesn't matter where you at in your career, your opinion matters. If you are being provided with that type of environment, you will feel a lot more comfortable speaking up. So I think that for my second job, I feel a lot more comfortable being assertive just because our organization really provides that atmosphere for women to speak up, for women to be assertive. And I think I really thrive in that type of environment. That's why when I'm able to be assertive with my jobs, I actually feel a lot more confident with it. I would say being assertive is not like an overnight skill. There were moments where I definitely feel, you know, insecure about my ability to do certain things, right? Because I'm in an organization where everyone's pretty much an engineer. There are a lot of technical knowledge that I wouldn't be able to know or I wouldn't feel comfortable asking questions with. And I had to kind of find my own space in the group, knowing when to ask the right question and knowing when to stay silent. So that's kind of like how I'm figuring out my pace here in my team.
And in terms of assertiveness with your social life, right? Is there a difference between being assertive professionally and being assertive in your social life? Like, how do you define the differences? Because I feel like...
I think that's a very good question. That's actually really funny because I think that with my very close friends, I'm definitely the less assertive one just because I'm more so, you know, I understand that people have different outlets of expressing their thoughts. For me, I don't really take that on my friends. I tend to kind of put myself into their shoe. And if I see something really, really wrong, and this is not a close friend of mine, maybe I'll be a lot more assertive with that. But if it's one of my closest friends, then I would try to find a different way to open up the conversation if there's something that I don't feel comfortable sharing or talking. Because I think that for me, friendship versus professional life, they're completely different. People at work, I don't really know them very well personally, and everyone is expected to act on a professional level, right? I think that friendship, relationship, you shouldn't be enforcing too much of those professionalism because it kind of kills the vibe of building authentic friendships and relationships. So I tend to be a lot more lenient when it comes to friends and my relationship with other people.
Can you give me an example of that? Because I'm trying to connect the dots right now. Like, for example, if Johnson and I have a conversation and he says something I don't like, right? He says like, Gio, DJs are not real musicians and I don't agree with him. How should I tell him that I'm an actual musician?
That's a very
right. How would you do it? How would you do it?
I don't think I was ever in this type of situation where I had to kind of call my friend out to see, oh, you're good with this, you're bad with this, and I'm the decision maker to decide whether you're good or not, right? I think for me, my role as a friend, specifically with my very close-knit friend groups, is that I'm the support system for them. I want to be, the ultimate person they can go to kind of share the problems. So I wouldn't necessarily go out to them and be like, hey, I don't think you're good at this. You should switch your mind, right? But I would say there were definitely moments where I really want to be honest. And I understand that there's a boundary where I can be honest and also supportive at the same time. I think that how I would approach this type of, I would say, topic or whatever convo you're talking about is to kind of provide my perspective first and give them like a example or what I think is true or right. It's ultimately their decision whether they think they're the best or they think they're suitable for this X, Y, and Z position or not, right? So that's kind of like how I approach to it. I wouldn't just call them out directly because I put people's feelings before my own. So I don't do that quite often with my friends.
Okay, so it's more like you want to like help mediate the conversation, right? Because you don't want to get in between the two people in a way, right? Because there's still that relationship that they have with you and you have with them that you want to keep. But Johnson, do you think that DJs are real musicians?
No, I think they are.
Okay,
like
cool.
You.
That's all I care
I was
about.
with you for 2 years, man. I definitely think you're the musician. Like you incorporate so much sounds and different types of music. You're definitely a musician.
Thank you. I'll take it. Wait, but going back to what I was saying, you also went over 3 things when you're talking about leadership. I appreciate you, Johnson, by the way. You talked about assertiveness, leadership, and networking, and also about empathy, right? Do you think a lot of kids these days lack empathy, and like why?
I think that's a really good question. I want you to define these kids a little bit, right? Because I think that between Generation Z to Generation
Millennial, I
Z,
think.
Millennials,
And then there's like Y.
what's the generation after 1990? I mean, after 2010? I don't even know.
I don't know.
So 3 different generations. They're all considered as kids, right? Like, really, it really depends on how you define them. But going back to the conversation of just interacting with people our age, I would say that the reason why a lot of people our age or a generation that came after us, there are less empathetic with different, scenarios in life. I think it has to do with the technology that I grew up with. I think that's really one of the key factors of why there are less empathetic.
Can you go a little bit more, deeper, I guess, like in terms of how technology?
I'm going to elaborate a little bit. Yeah. I think the reason why is, think about it. Okay. I don't know if you remember 911, but our generation is pretty much like 11. Our generation is pretty much the last generation to remember like 11. You were probably like, Gio, you're probably like 5 years old, and
I was 5 when it happened.
Probably 4 years old, 5 years old, right? So think about how much we have progressed as a generation, right? Our generation is literally the last generation to remember that. So I feel like for a lot of people who came after us or who just grew up close to our age, I think there's a huge difference just a few years apart. People who are born after 1996, 1995 versus people who are born after 1998, 1999 or 2000s, like they are completely different. And I think back in the day when we were kids, we didn't have iPod Touch, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have computers, right? So for us to really enjoy the new source of human interactions through going out to the playground to play with friends, doing fun activities with parents. And I think that there were a lot of times where you spend real physical time with each other. So I think that you can really sense that, very empathetic side of human nature, right? Versus kids now, let's say that if my cousin, for example, he was born after 2004 and he grew up learning how to use iPod Touch, learning how to use iPad, right? So for him, he's definitely a lot more less, I wouldn't say empathetic, but a lot more less, I think that he built up that, a more of an individual than a, collective, like, how do I phrase it? I'm more of an individual myself versus me when I'm in a group. I think that's how he identifies himself. I think that's a very common thing in a lot of generation because of the distraction of social media, distraction of how accessible informations are, right? Like you can literally go to internet and search for any information. Back in the day, it was kind of hard, right? There was no Google, there was no YouTube. So I think that because of, access to internet technology, people are open up to a lot of opportunities that wouldn't existed before. So they're far more likely to spend time with people in real life versus, back in the day when people are a lot more likely to spend time in person.
So would you essentially say that the friendships that we make today, they're not as genuine as before, just because it's so easy to be like, all right, send a message to someone anywhere in the world, and that's not real? quote unquote? Would you say that?
Honestly, you asked a really good question. If you asked me this question before COVID, I would definitely say yes, because I didn't believe in meeting people over internet. That's just my personal thing. I just felt like for me to really build a very good relationship with someone, like I would prefer to go out for a coffee chat, to hang out with this person for lunch, or just go on a walk, whatever, right? But I think that because COVID really restricted people to just restricted people into this virtual world, I think that now that I'm responding to this question, I think general relationship should be mutual, right? If Jonathan, they say that if I were to reach out to you and, we schedule a meeting 3 times and you never hit me out after, that's very one-sided. So why should I put into effort to create that relationship when it's just me trying so hard to maintain it, right? So I think it's really just comes from perspectives, right? Like if it's mutual, you care about our relationship just as much as I care about ours, then I think this shouldn't be work, right? This should be just easy. It should be just a quick call that I can call you and catch up. So I think definitely COVID has made me realize that, building a relationship doesn't have to be physical, but obviously it really depends on how you kind of approach to building relationship. I have this one really, really close friend in college. She was my roommate back in Hong Kong when we studied abroad together. And we don't really talk a lot because we're both very busy with our lives, and she works for night shift at a supply chain company. So the timing was never right. And I remember she did a fantastic job in the past few months during COVID, just reaching out to me every another 2 months. And I appreciate that. And I started reaching out to you because I think that, knowing that close relationship doesn't need to be every single day where you have to chat every single day and check in with each other every single day. Just when you think of someone and you reach out to them, that's considered as effort, right? So personally, I appreciate that piece a lot more than just on my phone texting my friend every single day. Sending me very different. Yeah.
So you were talking about close friendships, right? And so how do you think that those close friendships you can apply that to your professional life? Because I know that now we're all working remote, right? And especially because you work at a tech company, so most people were remote or can be remote, and moving forward, a lot of tech companies are gonna be remote. So how do you think you can apply these types of relationship building techniques to your professional career so that you actually get to know your team and stuff, right? Because I feel that's one of your biggest strengths is helping fostering a relationship, right?
I think you asked a very interesting question in terms of how I build relationship in my professional life versus how I build my relationship in real life, and did I apply any skills that I learned from real life into professional world? I can break that down into kind of 2 different areas. I think building relationship in real life versus building professional relationships is very different, but there are definitely common ground that you can reach. The first point that I want to make, the reason why it's very, very different is that I think that at professional world, there's a lot of things that you don't really share. I don't share my political belief at in my professional setting. I don't share with my coworkers about my religious belief, but I do share with them about, where I want to improve personally and professionally, right? I think that's what connects us together, because that's everyone at work, right? And I think in my real life, where I share a lot about my political belief, my personal belief, and my religious belief, right? So how do I find the common ground between these 2? I think that in a professional setting, there's a space called covering. A lot of people cover up, not for the selfish reason, but more so for, I want to cover up because I don't want people to see me otherwise. I want to be viewed the same. I want to cover up my tattoo at work because I don't want people to have a perception of me, right? That's kind of back in the day. I think now that we're working for a more modern world, a lot of companies are very accepting with people with piercing, tattoos. But I'm just listing that as an example that there are moments at, in a professional setting, you kind of restrict yourself from expressing your own opinions about certain things just because you want to just focus on work and your, technical skills and your ability to speak about who you are as a person at work. I think in personal life, when it comes to building relationship, for me personally, I care a lot about giving back to the community, donating to nonprofit organizations, and building friends who also have the same belief as me. I think that's very fundamental to me. That's kind of how I make connection with people, and obviously through sharing very similar personal upbringings, right? So definitely a little bit different. But how do I utilize those skills into my professional setting? I would say that just getting the support from my friends and that, words of affirmation from my friends and just that confidence to even carry a conversation in real life definitely has helped me to become a better employee at work as well. I don't think I'm ever shied away from conversations that are uncomfortable at work. I think that my friends and my support system in real life really gave me that ability to be efficient when it comes to carrying conversations at work. So, yeah.
Sorry, I'm like thinking of a question to ask right now because that was a lot. I'm processing right now.
I was comprehending that too.
You guys asked pretty good questions. I really appreciate these thoughtful questions. Definitely put me on the spot.
Yeah, this is
It's
like
not meant to.
it's not meant to, but it's like a life journal right now. I feel like we're writing a journal and we're speaking to you, and it's like you're the journal writing for us right now.
There is actually one question I want to ask. So how's being a female in tech? I know you said earlier, one of your first jobs, you were the only female. How's that experience been?
So I think I actually got one of the feedback from my first manager at my first job. He mentioned about how back in the day, a lot of these big giant companies are very, very sensitive with women expressing to be a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more bubbly at work. And I kind of asked him for feedback. And mind you, he is a 66-year-old white man. Obviously, his feedback is very biased. So he gave me a feedback saying how, hey, I noticed that you're very bubbly, you're very happy when you talk to people, but sometimes older people might take it the wrong way, thinking that you're flirting or you're being just, you're letting your personality speak before your ability, right? He didn't really put that, this way, but I interpreted it this way and I knew what he was coming from. And I think that for someone who's been working in a very male-dominated industry for so long, it was definitely a really, very refreshing experience for them to see, a 20-year-old Asian woman walking into a presentation room, being very confident, being very happy, and all that, right? So I think it was definitely a very fresh perspective for them. I would say definitely at my second job, I recognized that sometimes being a female at work is a strength, right? Because our org values a lot of these cultures with women empowerment, supporting women in tech. So I think it definitely gave me the ability to speak very confidently and present myself very confidently at work. I think definitely my first job, I wasn't very confident when it comes to, presenting. I wasn't really confident when it comes to initiating a conversation with clients. I think when I moved on to my second job, my team really provided me with the environment to be confident at my job. So I'm definitely feeling a lot more confident. It's still a work in progress because there's definitely some microaggressions sometimes happen at work that you don't even notice, right? So I would say, sorry, I'm like,
no, you can keep going.
Second job definitely provided me with the strength that I needed to become a female at work. If anything, I feel proud to be a female at work, especially a minority woman in my work. So,
yeah, I was gonna say, like, from the first moment I think I met you through Geo, I think you were always pretty outgoing, independent and confident. Was there at some point in your life where you're like, all right, I have to be like that? Or were you just kind of always like that throughout your, just kind of childhood, middle school, high school, and kind of just even
also growing up, I had always been very, I don't want to use the word like bubbly, but I would say growing up, I always been very positive. I think it has a lot to do with the environment that I grew up with. And I mentioned earlier that, my parents are not the strict type of parents where they beat you up for not getting A's in schools, where at some point in my childhood, I felt like I was my own parent because if I didn't get a really good score on my exam, I would feel really upset. My parents would be like, chill, like you shouldn't worry too much about it, just do better next time. So I feel like because, I grew up with a lot of disciplines for myself, I knew exactly what I wanted to do at a very young age in terms of knowing what the right morals are and knowing, what's right or wrong to do, and just be very good with judging both sides of the world. Has definitely provided me with that confidence to be my own person. So I would say it wasn't like a forced thing, right? But I would say that coming to the US, language barrier was definitely one of the issues for myself. When I first came to America, when I was in middle school, I couldn't communicate because of language barrier. And I kind of make that my own goal to learn English in like 1 year, just to make sure that I could make friends and talk to people, right? So I think that from the moment that I came to the States to the moment that I actually picked up English, those 1.5 years, it was very painful because I do talk a lot, and being able to communicate was one of my thing to do, right, back in the day. So that 1.5 years, I would say they were definitely a little bit more painful because I didn't really make a lot of friends. I wasn't able to communicate with people, but I definitely dedicated a lot of my time to learn the language and to pick up some cultural values that might not necessarily apply to kids who grew up in China, right? So, yeah.
So then moving into your adult life, right? Because you're able to learn English so quick in a year and a half, right? Like I can't really relate to that because I had to learn English in school and I also came from a different country. And coming here, like you have to learn all the cultural things, right? Like I don't understand football. Like that's like a huge thing here. I don't understand why.
You don't understand football,
right? I don't get that. Like why does everyone love football so much? So things like that, you have to like understand those. Do you ever feel like there's a lot to learn even though you've been here so long and you still hang out with like Asian Americans and American people too? And if so, like what are those things that you still like kind of like, oh my God, I still don't get it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've been to the States for a little over 12 years now. I would say, well, about to hit my 12 years in 2 months. I would say in the very beginning, definitely the pop culture was something that I struggled the most with because I didn't really grow up watching a lot of TV shows. Even when I came to the States, I still didn't really pick up watching TV shows. So sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of understand what my friends are talking about. But I would say that just living in Boston, when I participate in different programs, I actually was able to provide it with a lot of opportunities to kind of interact with kids from different backgrounds. So that 4 years in high school definitely boosted up my learning with different cultures for sure. I don't know if you know, but the town I was from Massachusetts, Malden, it's actually pretty diverse compared to any other towns in Massachusetts. So I felt like I was pretty lucky to be in the right environment to learn all these things. However, Gio, I think I can connect with you very well on the piece of, I still don't understand a lot of American sports. There's some TV shows till this day I still don't watch. Slang, I think.
Which one have you not watched yet?
People use like New York slangs or something that I don't particularly use. Mm-hmm. I will ask. But I think what's really funny and comforting just knowing that all the friends that I made, you guys, I don't know if you guys had those moments with me, but I just feel like all the friends that I have made in America, they are very accepting with who I am as a person. Sometimes I would pronounce certain words wrong, and sometimes I will ask about very basic knowledge about certain things. Mm-hmm. They don't really judge me, and they started laughing at me, and I think that's part of the joy, I guess, just because I don't really feel ashamed of not knowing stuff. I think that as long as I know what my values are and what I'm really good at, it's up to my friends to decide when they want to teach me. I don't necessarily see that as embarrassment, or I don't see that as, I got to pick it up because I don't know this. Like, I'm in a space where I feel very comfortable just to have a conversation with people with things that I don't know. And I'm completely okay with asking, what is it? Maybe back in the day when I first started, going to school, going to high school, I felt embarrassed of asking, but now I'm just like, I'm 24 years old. Like there are a lot of things that I don't know, but I'm okay with not knowing. So, yeah. I
mean, there are a lot of things I don't know either. Like, I'm pretty sure we've all said words wrong. Like I used to say comfortable.
Wait, what?
I used to say comfortable. Comfortable.
Oh,
it's not comfortable. It's where I'm from. You say comfortable. And then salmon. I used to say salmon when I came to the U.S.
Salmon?
Yeah, because we say the L in the Philippines, dude. And then you have some too, dude. Don't laugh at me. Come on.
I know.
Wait, don't that from? Wait, you were born in
I grew up in California.
Yeah, so. Johnson has some too. He definitely has some.
Yeah. I just don't remember it right now, but there's a couple
you do.
here and there, dude. Like what? I remember like
Yeah,
Cahoon fries.
Cahoon fries?
It's supposed to be Cajun fries, but I say Cahoon fries.
Yeah. See, so it's not just
No,
like
the thing is like I think at first people are so afraid of like calling you out just because they don't want to correct you. But I think I built up this thing where my friends all feel very comfortable kind of not calling me out, but I think like ever since I was in high school, I was more like a mentee to everyone, right? Because hey, this is my new school. I'm learning English. Feel free to correct me, right? And because I provided such comfortable space for my friends to call me out and provide that space for me, I'm so used to it nowadays. Whenever I pronounce certain things wrong, to this day, I still pronounce a lot of words wrong, and I'm okay with it because I think that I do a better job when it comes to presenting because I rehearse my speech, whatever, couple times. But when it comes to forming a very natural conversation, I still pronounce a lot of words wrong. And I'm okay with that. So sometimes it's, good to make fun of yourself from time to time. And I'm okay with doing that. So
not a big deal. That's how we grow.
Yep.
But wait, so Johnson, when you meet someone that's not from the US, like do you just, are there like certain things that you notice that a lot of us do differently? I'm just curious because Sudan and I didn't grow up here. Like we didn't fully grow up here. So like, what's like the one things that you've noticed from like me or like your interactions with Sudan that like you can honestly be like, yeah, I have a feeling we're not on the same page right now. Like, is there a moment in time?
Dude, that's a tough one, dude. I don't know, but sometimes I feel like when you would try to explain something or I don't know, just like stuff like when you told me like how like in Manila you would be like, all right, I paid a cop off, and I was just like, what? Like you can do that? But here it's like, if a cop stops me, I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna listen to you directly. But for you, when you told me like, I don't want this ticket or some shit, you would just pay him off, and you just let it go, and that's normal for you.
That's
and
normal like, where I'm from, dude.
That's not normal here.
Because like when you like, especially when you grow up in a cultural difference, right? I think you have to like understand that the world is so different in different parts of like different countries, right? Like especially like growing up in a developing country, then coming to a modern country, I didn't understand what mobile data was. So when people were reading comics on their phone here, I was like, that's crazy. I literally thought that was crazy because I had a flip phone till like, I was like in like freshman year of high school. So that's why I was like, this is crazy. Like, and so a lot of the things that we do learn, right? And we have to learn as like, kind of like, we're like quote unquote foreigners in here, even though we're not really foreigners. Because we've been here long enough to say like, yeah, I'm American, but not really American.
You're a New Yorker, bro.
Well, not the same thing. Like
you're technically a New Yorker.
Like based off of like all the stuff that's happening in the world, we're like kind of like, yeah, I'm American, but I'm not like a bad American, you know? And you have to like be like very clear about that. Like I know what I'm doing. I know my shit. I know what's up. And you
I think sometimes like certain values are a little bit different, right? You would say, Gio?
Yeah. Like I know that like there's a day I'll have to go home. Like Sudan, do you think you'll ever have to like go home again? Or do you think you're gonna stay in the US for a long time?
Go home as like
China. Like, do you think you're gonna go back to China like ever in your life and stay there for like 5 years?
I don't think so. My parents actually live in the States, so home for me is New York City. So whenever I go home, I go back to New York. Yeah. So whenever I go back to China, it's more so visiting my grandparents and my relatives. So I don't think I will ever move to China, but I think that moving back to New York has definitely in the back of my head. That could be my 1 year plan for now. So.
Ooh, so you want to come back to the city?
What?
So you want to come back to the city?
Yeah, because I think that I'm not very good with like long distance relationship. So now that I'm dating someone who lives in your city, I think that it will only make sense to kind of enhance a relationship by being in the same city. And I kind of dislike myself with this, but I gave a very brief timeline for Seattle. I feel like this is like a city where I want to test it out, feel the water. I eventually want to move back to New York. So
you mentioned you're dating someone. So how did that come along? Like, did you kind of knew this person already, or was it through like apps or through friends?
It's funny because he's actually my neighbor.
What? Wait, sick. Like an actual neighbor?
Sick.
Like
this is like this is like a movie.
To give a little background, I think I personally don't like to share too much about my dating history here, but I think we live one block from each other, but we know each other. We knew of each other. We have each other on social media, but we never really met up before. One of those people that you just follow on social media because you have mutual friends. We went to the same school together. So one of the days I was just dancing with the Asian grandma at the park. I think he recognized the park and he mentioned that, hey, I didn't know that you also live in the neighborhood. So we connected because we have a lot of shared values. It was supposed to be, just meet up to grab coffee, whatever, just kind of like a networking event. And eventually we clicked and went up dating. So
nice.
Yeah, the rest was history.
It's like a movie, man. That's like the Girl Next Door movie. It's like, something like that, right? But yeah, love is always good to find because that's like the best. That's like that will stay with you forever because you'll never forget it. Yeah, that's just my mantra for the day. And so when it comes to like, meeting people, right? Because you're like, oh, this is supposed to be like, I noticed you said this is supposed to be like a networking type thing. Whenever you think of like networking, because you mentioned that earlier when we were talking about like the thing you learned from a lot of your organizations, like what is like your biggest tip for networking? Because I feel like you're very good at that.
I don't think I have any tips. I think the only advice that I would give to people who are trying to figure out how to network with people is to understand that when you get on call with someone to ask for advice, you shouldn't see that as a very transactional relationship. You should see it as building relationship, just how you will approach to a new friend. That's kind of how I see it. So whenever I reach out to people, I don't want to necessarily make it very, very formal. I think that given my very approachable nature, I like to kind of approach people like everyone's my new friend. So I think that provides a lot of comfortable space for people to really share with you in a very organic way. So that's kind of how I build a relationship from there. Definitely be able to be a good storyteller is very important when it comes to networking with other people. So yeah.
Johnson, is that how you deal with it with your clients?
What do you mean?
Like, are you just like, people? Is everyone just like your friend? You're just like, hey man, I've known you like 10 years. Is that what it's like with you and your clients?
Yeah, honestly, like you just be like, hey, how's it going? How are you? Where are you from? Do you live in the area? And then you kind of just go from there. It's like the best one. You just build rapport through that way and just find something that you guys can relate to and just kind of build on that. And then again, for me personally, I don't think of it as a transaction. It's just like Sudan said, you're just meeting new people. That's what I love about my job. That's why I chose my job, is because I didn't want to be stuck in an office. I wanted to just be able to meet people from all parts of the world doing different things. Like, for example, I know people from the models, who does finance, who does art. So that's what I love about my job, to be able to meet people.
Interesting. And do you, Sudan and Johnson, do either of you have any one-liners that you use when you want to open a conversation?
One-liners?
Yeah, like instead of like, hey, what's up, man? Or like something like that, you have like something interesting you say, like for example, if I see someone, like you see like the way they're dressed, like, oh, like XYZ or something like that, that's not just like, hi, my name is Johnson, or hi, my name is Sudan.
One thing that I kind of use is like, if I know the area code, I'll be like, wait, are you from Orange County or are you from LA? And then that just kind of breaks like the ice already, or like, if you know like a phone number from like 917 is New York or just something Florida, you can just easily just break the ice like that. It's like, oh, Florida, New York, California. And from there, you just kind of build that rapport.
I think for me, how I build rapport is by asking very simple questions like what Jonathan said. I think that one of the most important tips is to make people feel comfortable even wanting to talk to you, right? So let's say that if I meet someone who's my age and there's something that you can compliment with their appearance, their outfits, I'll definitely make a comment. I say that, Gio, I meet you at the party for the first time. And I'm like, wow, I really like that blue shirt. Where'd you get it from? Just a very, conversational opener would be good. And then obviously I'm not going to go all my way out there, be like, oh my God, you look so good, right? Like it doesn't come off as like real. But just making a comment, asking question about the simple thing that you have, that opens up the conversation. So definitely making people feel very comfortable in the very beginning to open up the conversation is really important.
So with that, like networking is a big thing that you talked about too. And then you also talked about like empathy. You also talked about leadership, right? Out of like your whole career that you've had so far, because we're all very young, like you, me, and Johnson are all like super young, and we're only like what, like 2 or 3 years into our lives outside of college. What was like your biggest change like once we left college?
I think the biggest change once I left college is to be on schedule for everything. Just building a routine was definitely very difficult. Even though college was kind of like a mess for a lot of people, right? But I think that I had a structure when I was in college. I was provided with syllabus, knowing exactly how to get good grades, right? I could talk to my professor to ask questions, and I could always study for my exams to make my next exam better, right? To kind of improve from there. So I was always in that very structural environment to kind of learn. But I think that in real world, nobody was there to tell you right or wrong. It really is up to you. So having that strong self-discipline is definitely really, really important in the real world. I definitely struggled the most with self-discipline in the first year during my first job, just because I didn't really walk into my job with a structure. But I would say it's still work in progress, but I'm working towards that. That's definitely an issue for a lot of people our age, just because college versus the real world is very different. People kind of handle situations very differently as well. So definitely at moments, from time to time, you don't necessarily feel very confident in terms of how you handle problems. And to be quite honest, I don't think college really provided everyone with that ability to handle situations and problems in the real world, right? So sometimes you have to figure out yourself. And I think that's definitely one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people our age.
No, I think I totally agree with you. Like college is kind of more, you just kind of know how to learn and how to study and kind of meet people. Mm-hmm. The world is completely different. Like you're put in situations where even like your boss or manager might not even like have expected. So you just kind of go with the flow. And sometimes if you fail, you just kind of like, all right, you kind of learn from it. Has there been times where in your job where, obviously you go through training, you have your fellow colleagues who kind of help you out and everything. Has there been a time where like, all right, it's completely a new environment and you just had to not necessarily adapt, but just kind of go with the flow and kind of use your past experience to make the best out of it?
For me personally, I think that every experience is a new experience. Whether you learn from the past or not, I kind of see every experience as a new experience. For example, for my role, I'm a program manager for one of the tech giants, right? So I would say one of the most challenging parts of my job is be able to figure out a solution without knowing the direction. Just the ambiguity of the job is the nature of the job. So sometimes people tend to walk into the problem without breaking down the problem, right? So I think that what I've learned from the past is that definitely when you walk into a problem that you like to solve, break them down into small portions, right? And knowing that sometimes one big chunk of problem isn't necessarily, in direct correlation with a big solution. Sometimes it takes multiple small solutions to add to that, big solution. So that's kind of like how I approach my life as well when it comes to solving problems. I don't kind of see them as a big problem. I kind of break them down into smaller ones, to kind of provide solution from there.
Joe, do you have anything to add there?
Sorry, I was on mute. But like basically you're saying that there are problems that you have to break down, right?
Yeah.
And that there's some things that you have to like compartmentalize into smaller bits. Can you provide an example of that? I just want to help visualize that for everyone that's listening.
Example, I would say when it comes to just making, I have this model in my head. It's called fear setting. So pretty much, to compare the outcome of the sphere versus is it worth it, it's not worth it, right? So I feel like having that kind of framework in my mind, for example, moving to Seattle, is this the biggest, I would consider this as one of the biggest risks I've ever taken, moving away to a new city. But I tend to kind of compare that with, is it going to be worth it, right? Am I going to learn something from it by moving? Or is it just going to be, I'm going to do it without a plan, right? So I think that fear setting is very, very important. Definitely constantly compare the fear that you have versus the outcome you're going to get out from taking on this risk is very important. So that's kind of how I break them down into smaller chunks by asking myself these very, introspective questions to kind of make me know what I'm going. However, not every single risk that I've taken, they're completely good risks, right? There are risks where I have to pay damage for it, where I have to spend a lot of time fixing, right? But I think that in our early career, it's really, really important just knowing that there's definitely a great balance between taking the right risk versus taking the risk when you're not going to do well, right? So I think that the support systems coming, right? You can ask your friends for advice, network with people who have been there before, right? The reason why we learn from the history, the reason why we learn from mentors is because they can tell you what they have learned from the past, and you make your own use case scenario from there and learn from there. So that's definitely very important to keep in mind.
But yeah, so that was like a very good way to put it, is that you also mentioned like mentors and having like different like social interactions. Fun fact about yourself, I noticed that that you like rollerblade and that you do all these like fun things. Is that also like a really good way for you to like find mentorship and make friends that are like kind of outside your own sphere of influence, because it like helps expand your mind? And also, if so, is there any like other skills that you've learned through like your recreational activities, like UX, UI design and things like that?
I would say definitely. I think every single time when I participate in a new activity, the agenda was never, oh, this is a very fun activity, I'm just gonna learn and have fun and take nice pictures and call it a day, right? I think that being the person I am, I like to kind of make everything that I picked up, every hobby that I have, into something on the educational side. Even when it's just a smaller piece of educational purpose, I would like that. So I would say when it comes to, creating content, participating in different rollerblading activities, I definitely want to merge myself into a different community to kind of see perspective that I don't necessarily see from my own community, right? Because I'm sure that, I also hang out with a lot of Asian Americans in New York City. Sometimes our mindset could be very similar, because they say that you're the average of the 5 friends you hang out the most with, right? So if I could expose myself to different communities, I could view social causes a little bit different, right? Given the current situation, a lot of people are trying to look for good conversations that are completely unbiased, that you can completely learn from various experiences. And I think being involved with different communities certainly helps you to open up your mind and kind of see the world a little bit more differently.
So have you ever thought of becoming an influencer or something? Because it seems like you have the charisma and like...
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I started creating content actually on one of the Chinese platform called Red. It's called Xiaohongshu. So it was crazy because I actually used to publish content on Chinese TikTok. So I think while I like the aspect of being able to share something that I learned to the greater audience, I did get really overwhelmed by just getting a huge chunk of followers, right? Some people love the frame like, oh, I'm getting so many followers, I'm getting this many likes. I think that as I grew older, I've eventually, phased out of wanting validation online. I think right now that I spend a lot of my time wanting to feel very close relationship with people by just calling and texting them instead of focusing a lot on social media. However, from the content creation aspect, I think I will always have something to say, always have something to share. So if it reaches the point where I feel like I should have a platform to share a niche market that I want to share my thoughts on certain things, I'll definitely consider in the future. But as for now, definitely not for the monetary reason when it comes to creating content. I slowly just want to create content because it's something that I enjoy doing. So I definitely considered it, but I haven't really had a huge plan on that for sure.
So today we kind of talked about, friendships, leaderships, if there's something that you want to tell our listeners and viewers, what would that be?
I don't want it to make it seem like I'm giving advice for people that are our age, but I think that both you and Gio mentioned about, a lot of people our age are a lot more or less empathetic towards certain situations. I think that empathy to me is very, very important. And I think I emphasized so many times in our conversation today. So, if I have to really tell people something that I really hold dear to heart, definitely to put yourself into other people's shoes, to really understand things from their perspective. I think this entire pandemic has made me realize that building relationship is not easy, especially, mental health issues. We need to kind of normalize that as a normal conversation to have in our daily life. So checking in should be one of the efforts that you have to take in order to kind of make friends and make great relationship with people. So I would say definitely relationship building for me is really important. And by doing so, definitely start with building genuine relationship with people by being there for them and just constantly checking with them. Because a lot of times, you know, what people post on social media might not necessarily reflect on how they are, what their current situations are, right? So definitely make a habit of checking with people regularly, just to kind of give them a call, text. It's much better than just assuming that they're doing good based on their social media presence. So.
Exactly. You sound like Gary Vaynerchuk right now. I feel like you watch a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk like I do. Because empathy is a big thing and it's something that we all need to learn.
Yeah.
Right? Shout out Gary V. I doubt he's watching this, but cool. Johnson, do you have anything you want to say to that?
No, I think Sudan hit the spot. Like, especially with COVID the past year, a lot of people haven't been able to branch out as much as they want to be, and they might feel lost at times, or they feel like they're on their own, but they're not. And I think it's also our job, like Sudan said, that we should reach out to certain people. Just reach out to everyone, you know, like your friends, people you're not even close with, and just say, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Is everything okay? And then I think people just want to know, just want to be kind of seen and kind of know that someone out there is actually caring.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with that, we can wrap this one up with Sudan. Thank you so much for coming to and being on the Come Up with us. I tried to do that catchphrase again, but we'll cut that. But we'll get it. Thank you so much. And peace out, everyone.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye, everyone.